Her name is Blessing. She is 27 years old and she sells smoked fish at the Lafia main market in Nasarawa state. She wakes up before 5, loads her wares onto a teke and gets to her store before the school run traffic begins. Her customers are mostly housewives and restaurant owners. She has been doing this since she was 19, taking over from her mother when her mother's knees gave out. Nasarawa state is north-central Nigeria. It borders the FCT. Its people are mostly farmers and traders. Its politics has historically been managed by whoever controls the federal government. Buhari's APC ran everything here for 8 years. Blessing has never seen her state vote for what most political analysts would call an unexpected candidate. Unexpected things do not happen in Nasarawa by most people's reckoning. But in February 2023, something very unexpected happened. Blessing, who had never voted Labour Party in her life and had no Labour Party campaign material in her market store, voted Peter Obi. And she was not alone. The Labour Party won Nasarawa State in the 2023 presidential election. Over 191,000 votes for a candidate that no political model predicted would win there. What is happening in Nasarawa and in Plateau State and in Benue and across the Middle Belt is about a set of numbers that has been sitting in the INEC result archive for over 2 years, mostly unanalyzed, mostly undiscussed. Numbers that could be the single most important factor in the 2027 presidential race if the NDC builds on them properly. The question is, does Peter Obi's campaign understand what Blessing's vote actually represents? And if it does, is it doing anything concrete to protect and expand it before 2027? Before we go deeper, if you are just finding NaijaNewsWatch, welcome. This channel exists to break down what is really happening in Nigerian politics without the noise and without the spin. If that is the kind of analysis you enjoy, hit subscribe and stay with me, because this story is about to get a lot more interesting. Let us set the foundation clearly, because the Middle Belt story is one that the 2023 post-election analysis largely missed. In the February 2023 presidential election, Peter Obi won 6.1 million votes nationally. Most of the analysis focused on what everyone expected, his sweep of the southeast, his surprising Lagos result. But the Middle Belt numbers tell a story that has been almost completely under-analyzed. Verified election results from INEC confirm that Obi secured 43% of the vote from the south and 14.2% from the north. That 14.2% of the northern vote on a party with no northern governor, no northern party structure, and almost no formal campaign infrastructure in the region is the number that should have generated serious analysis and has not. More specifically, Obi carried Plateau State in the presidential election. He won Nasarawa State, where he received 191,361 votes, beating both Tinubu's 172,922 and Atiku's 147,903. He performed very well in Benue State. Combined, he gathered over 1 million votes across just those 3 Middle Belt states, Plateau, Nasarawa, and Benue, out of a total northern vote that he was supposed to barely register in. The Middle Belt is the zone of Nigeria that sits between the predominantly Muslim north and the predominantly Christian south. It is ethnically diverse, it is religiously mixed, with significant Christian populations in Plateau, Benue, and Nasarawa, living under the shadow of the Muslim-Muslim ticket and alongside communities that have experienced severe farmer-herder violence and federal security neglect. It is also home to some of the fastest-growing voter registration numbers in the country, driven by young people who see no future in the patronage politics of both APC and PDP. Why this matters now in June 2026, Obi is on the NDC platform. His Kwankwaso partnership is supposed to add the Northwest. But the Middle Belt, the region where Obi already has a proven INEC-verified electoral base, is receiving almost no public strategic attention from the NDC campaign. And the NDC is also not the Labour Party. The ballot paper in 2027 will say NDC, not LB. And Blessing in Lafia needs a reason to find that NDC box and tick it. Now let us look at the constitutional and electoral architecture. Because to understand why the Middle Belt numbers matter so specifically, you need to understand the spread requirement and how the Middle Belt sits within it. The Nigerian Constitution's Section 134(2) requires that a winning presidential candidate must, in addition to having the highest total votes, secure at least 25% of votes cast in at least 2/3 of the 36 states. That is at minimum 24 states where the winning candidate needs at least a quarter of the vote. In 2023, Obi met the 25% threshold in the FCT in all 5 southeast states, in Lagos, and in several other states. But his Middle Belt performance was crucial to his credibility as a genuinely national candidate rather than a regional one. Obi carried Plateau. He won Nasarawa. His Benue performance was strong enough to be documented alongside those two. In the north-central geopolitical zone, which includes these three states plus Niger, Kogi, Nasarawa and Kwara, his presence was the most significant northern footprint that the Labour Party had built. For 2027, the NDC's path to meeting the constitutional threshold in 24 states runs directly through the Middle Belt. Without it, the NDC is essentially a southern party with a Kano appendage, and no southern party has ever won a Nigerian presidential election without meaningful northern presence across multiple states. Kwankwaso's Kano contribution is expected to handle the northwest, but who handles Plateau? Who handles Benue? Who handles Nasarawa? These states where Obi already won in 2023, who is rebuilding the ward structures that delivered them? The Middle Belt's current security situation adds an additional institutional dimension. The farmer-herder crisis, the displacement of farming communities, the inadequate federal security response, these grievances have intensified since 2023, which means the voter anger that drove unexpected Labour Party results in 2023 has not dissipated, it has deepened. The institutional challenge for the NDC is converting deepened voter anger into organized electoral participation, not just sentiment, in states where the party has almost no formal structure. Now let us go deep. This is where the Middle Belt numbers become either the most underutilized asset in Nigerian opposition politics or the most squandered opportunity of the 2027 cycle. Let us start with the specific political dynamic that produced those 2023 Middle Belt results and name it precisely. Obi played the religious card correctly, calculating, rightly as it turned out, that the angst of Christians in the so-called worrisome places in the Middle Belt region would be sufficient to make beleaguered voters there pull the lever for him. He carried both Plateau states and won Nasarawa state, and did very well in Benue. The religious card phrase is important to engage with carefully because NaijaNewsWatch does not take religious sides. What the SIFR analysis is describing is a specific political reality. Communities in the Middle Belt that have experienced years of farmer-herder violence, where the death toll in some states has exceeded Boko Haram's toll in the northeast, where the federal government's response has been perceived as inadequate and sometimes biased towards herder communities. These communities voted against the Muslim-Muslim ticket in 2023, not out of religious hatred, but out of survival politics. They voted for the candidate they believed saw them, and Obi, through specific outreach to Christian Middle Belt communities, gave them a reason to believe he did. Now here is the pattern interrupt that changes the whole framing of this analysis. In Nasarawa, in 2023, Obi won 191,361 votes. Tinubu got 172,922. Atiku got 147,903. Labour Party won a state that every pre-election model assigned to either APC or PDP. Not because of a massive Labour Party organizational presence, not because of governor machinery, not because of FAAC-driven patronage, because 191,361 Nasarawa voters, traders like Blessing, farmers, teachers, civil servants, made individual decisions to vote for a candidate who they believed represented something different. Those voters still exist. Blessing still goes to the Lafia market every morning. The farmer-herder violence has not stopped. The federal security response has not dramatically improved. The Muslim-Muslim ticket is still in place for 2027. The structural conditions that produced the 2023 Middle Belt result have not gone away, they have intensified. But here is what has changed. The ballot paper will say NDC, not LB. The campaign in Nasarawa in 2023 was largely self-organizing. Obedient volunteer networks coordinating through WhatsApp, through churches, through community associations. In 2027, those volunteer networks need to be reactivated on a new platform. And reactivation requires investment, not just money, but visible on-the-ground organizational presence that tells Blessing, we know you voted for us in 2023, we remember Nasarawa, we are here for 2027. Now let us talk about who stands to benefit and who stands to lose from the Middle Belt numbers. The NDC's specific opportunity. In states where the NDC could replicate or improve on Obi's 2023 Labour Party margins, Plateau, Nasarawa, and Benue, it has a chance to meet the 25% constitutional threshold in north-central states that no analysis currently assigns to Peter Obi's column for 2027. Every north-central state that the NDC meets the 25% requirement in is a state that reduces the geographic spread burden on Obi's total coalition. And every north-central state that meets the threshold makes the NDC look more like a genuinely national party and less like a southern coalition with an NDC label.
The APC's specific vulnerability in the Middle Belt. The Middle Belt is where APC's structural advantage is weakest and where community-level grievance is strongest. The farmer-herder violence has alienated agricultural communities. The federal government's security response has been documentably insufficient. Plateau State's Governor Hyacinth Alia ran on an APC platform in 2023 but has repeatedly expressed frustration with the federal government's approach to the state's security crisis. This is not a solidly governed APC zone. The structural machine is there, but the community loyalty that the machine depends on is cracked. The silent players in this story. The most important silent player for the Middle Belt in 2027 is the Christian Association of Nigeria, specifically its state chapters in Plateau, Benue, and Nasarawa. CAN leadership in these states does not issue formal presidential endorsements, but they communicate, they convene, their positions reach community members through church platforms in ways that no social media campaign can replicate. In 2023, the CAN environment in the Middle Belt was broadly permissive of Obi's candidacy. Whether that environment is maintained or disrupted in 2027 depends on factors that are entirely separate from Obi's campaign strategy, including developments in the farmer-herder crisis, the state of federal-CAN relations, and how the Muslim-Muslim ticket question plays out. The second silent player is the Governor Alia factor in Plateau State. A sitting governor whose own public statements have reflected frustration with federal security response is not the same as a governor whose machine will deliver clean APC results in a presidential race. Watch Alia's public communications about the Tinubu administration's handling of Plateau's security situation. Any public criticism from Alia, even oblique, is a signal that his APC loyalty in the 2027 presidential contest is conditional rather than automatic. Now, if what I just laid out surprises you, drop a comment below. I want to know your take before we get to the part that changes the whole picture. Let us come back to Blessing in the Lafia fish market. She voted Labour Party in 2023 not because she was an Obi ideologue, not because she is Igbo, she is not, but because the community she lives in had been through enough violence, enough security failure, enough feeling that the government did not see them, that a different option felt worth trying. In 2026, her community is still recovering from displacement caused by farmer-herder violence. The road to her market is still broken. The hospital in her neighborhood still lacks essential medicines. The federal government is still discussing the farmer-herder crisis in press conferences rather than in the communities themselves. For Blessing, the 2027 election is not primarily a political calculation, it is a survival question. Which candidate on which platform has demonstrated that they understand what communities in the Middle Belt are going through and has a credible plan to address it? The NDC has not yet clearly answered that question for Blessing, not because Obi is hostile to Middle Belt issues, but because the NDC's public platform has been dominated by discussions of elite-level political realignment, Atiku, the ADC deregistration, Kwankwaso's NDC internal crisis, while the voter who already delivered in 2023 in states nobody predicted is waiting to be reached on a new platform. For the broader Middle Belt, for farming communities in Benue and Plateau and Nasarawa, the consequence of being ignored by the NDC in the pre-election build-up is the possibility that 2027 produces a lower Labour Party NDC performance in the region than 2023 did. Not because voters changed their minds, but because the organizational infrastructure to convert sentiment into ballots was never rebuilt after the platform switch. The international dimension of the Middle Belt electoral story is real and specific. The Middle Belt's security crisis, the farmer-herder violence, the displacement, the insecurity in Benue, Plateau, and Nasarawa has been documented by international human rights organizations, including Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and the UN Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. The scale of the crisis and the FG's inadequate response have featured in US State Department human rights reports and in congressional testimonies about security in West Africa. The same communities that experienced this documented violence in 2022 and 2023 and whose anger at the FG's response drove unexpected Labour Party results are still living under those conditions in 2026. International partners who are monitoring Nigeria's 2027 election environment will specifically assess whether the communities most affected by insecurity and humanitarian crisis have meaningful political choices on the 2027 ballot. An NDC that builds visible, credible middle belt structures before 2027 will be assessed as a genuinely national opposition with a security accountability argument. An NDC that fails to do so will be assessed as a predominantly southern coalition with limited northern penetration, which changes how international observers characterize the competitive quality of the 2027 election. For Nigerians in the diaspora, particularly those with family in Middle Belt states, the 2027 election represents a specific accountability moment. The communities that sent your relatives to displacement, the violence in Benue, in Plateau's farming zones, in the southern Kaduna border communities, these are communities whose political choices in 2027 will be shaped by whether any candidate demonstrates a specific, credible security and development program for the Middle Belt. Obi's one-term pledge and governance-first argument resonated in 2023. Whether the NDC platform can carry that argument into these specific communities in 2027 is the most important diaspora advocacy question for Middle Belt Nigerians abroad. Let me address what people are getting wrong about this story. The first misconception from NDC and obedient supporters is that the 2023 Middle Belt results are essentially guaranteed to repeat in 2027 on the NDC platform because of Obi's personal brand and the ongoing security grievances. They are not guaranteed. The ballot paper change from LP to NDC is a real electoral risk, particularly in communities where the Labour Party brand was the first-time recognizable non-APC, non-PDP option many voters had ever encountered. First-time party brand introductions do not transfer automatically when the brand changes, and the NDC's documented weakness outside Kano means that the ward-level organization that protects votes at collation level, which was already thin in the Middle Belt in 2023, is even thinner in 2027 on a less established platform. The second misconception from APC supporters who point to Middle Belt governor alignments is that because most North-Central governors are APC-aligned, the presidential results will simply follow the gubernatorial alignment. Plateau's 2023 results refute this. Governor Alia won Plateau for APC at the gubernatorial level in the same 2023 election in which Peter Obi won Plateau at the presidential level. Split-ticket voting in the Middle Belt is a documented phenomenon. Voters who support their APC governor for local reasons while voting for a presidential candidate who speaks to their national security and governance concerns. The governor's machine can mobilize for gubernatorial results without automatically delivering presidential results. The third misconception is the most consequential. It is the belief within the NDC's visible public communication strategy that the Middle Belt takes care of itself. The 2023 results were largely self-organizing. They grew from community-level political consciousness, obedient volunteer networks, and CAN institutional positioning rather than formal NDC or LP campaign investment. In 2027, that organic self-organization has to be deliberately activated on a new platform, and the activation requires visible NDC presence in Lafia, in Jos, in Makurdi, in the communities themselves. That presence is not yet documented as a priority in any NDC public communication. Here is what to watch: 3 specific signals that will tell you whether the NDC is treating the Middle Belt with the seriousness the numbers require. First signal, whether the NDC establishes formal ward-level structures in Nasarawa, Plateau, and Benue before the 2026 year-end deadline. The NDC is widely acknowledged to have limited presence outside Kano. A professor of political science in Sokoto noted that the NDC didn't have any presence in Plateau, Benue, Nasarawa, and other states. Watch whether NDC party registrations, ward executives, and local campaign offices appear in these specific states. Physical, visible NDC presence in Lafia, Jos, and Makurdi, not just social media activity, is the signal that the campaign is taking the Middle Belt seriously. Second signal, whether Obi makes a specific dedicated campaign visit to any of the 3 core 2023 Middle Belt states before September 2026.
a presidential candidate visiting the communities that delivered his best unexpected results in 2023, specifically in the Middle Belt, would be a powerful signal to voters like Blessing that she and her community are remembered, not just harvested. Campaign visits are measurable and public. Their absence is equally measurable. Third signal, whether can state-level chapters in Plateau and Benue issue any guidance or positioning statements ahead of 2027. CAN does not formally endorse presidential candidates, but its communication environment, whether it remains permissive of Obi's candidacy or shifts towards political neutrality under pressure from the current federal government, will shape the information environment in church communities across the Middle Belt. Any formal CAN statement, national or state level, that either affirms or challenges the conditions that produced 2023 Middle Belt results is worth watching. Best case scenario for Obi, the NDC builds formal ward-level structures in Nasarawa, Plateau and Benue by September 2026. Obi makes a specific campaign visit to Jos and Makodi. CAN state chapters maintain the permissive environment of 2023. The farmer-herder security crisis remains unresolved, which it will,
continuing to motivate the defensive community voting that delivered 2023 results. The NDC matches or improves on Labour Party's 2023 Middle Belt performance. The constitutional spread requirement is met in north-central states that no analyst currently assigns to the NDC column, and Peter Obi goes into 2027 with a genuine national coalition claim rather than a southern plus Kano argument. Worst-case scenario. The NDC fails to rebuild ward structures in the Middle Belt. The platform switch from LP to NDC costs between a quarter and a third of the 2023 Middle Belt vote, as first-time LP voters cannot find or recognize the NDC on the ballot. CAN institutional communication shifts toward political neutrality, not against Obi, but simply less engaged, reducing the church-level political information environment that activated the 2023 vote. The Middle Belt 2023 vote was a gift. The 2027 question is whether the NDC is treating it as one. Let us come back to Blessing in the Lafia fish market. At the beginning of this video, she gave the question, does Peter Obi's campaign understand what her vote in 2023 actually represents, and is it doing anything concrete to protect and expand it before 2027? Here is the honest answer. Based on what is publicly documented, the NDC's primary campaign attention has been focused on elite-level coalition management, the ADC deregistration, the Kwankwaso internal dispute, the Atiku-Obi relationship, the communities that delivered over 1 million Middle Belt votes in 2023 without being asked, without formal campaign infrastructure, out of survival politics and the hunger for something different. Those communities are not yet the visible focus of NDC's 2027 investment. That is not a condemnation. The NDC is a new platform fighting multiple fronts simultaneously, legal, political, structural. But the Middle Belt numbers are too significant and too fragile to assume will take care of themselves. My measured conclusion. The Middle Belt is Peter Obi's best chance of demonstrating that the NDC is a genuinely national political force, rather than a southern coalition. The numbers already exist. INEC's verified results from 2023 put them in writing. What does not yet exist is the organizational infrastructure to replicate those numbers on a new platform in 2027. The window to build that infrastructure is closing. Ward executive elections and party structure registration deadlines do not wait for elite-level political negotiations to conclude. Blessing in Lafia is waiting. She will vote for whoever shows up. The question I want to leave you with is this. Do you think the NDC is doing enough to rebuild and protect its Middle Belt base before 2027, or is it so consumed with elite-level coalition management that the grassroots voter who already proved it is possible is being left to fend for herself again? Drop your honest answer in the comments. If this breakdown gave you clarity on what is really going on, do me a favor. Share it with one person who needs to understand this. Like the video, subscribe to NaijaNewsWatch, and I will see you in the next one. Stay sharp.